Welcome back to Stitch Clinic. This is Granny's Legacy Patterns, and I'm here, Kim Zink, with Katie Hubblewhite, and we are going to talk about a fun new stitch that I call a scalloped chain stitch. And to start, you just need to do a chain, a simple chain. And the trick to making this stitch the best is to make sure your chains are consistent. So and not pull up too tight, because we need to make this a scallop. So I try to make every chain exactly the same length and not pull it up too tight. Leave it to have a little loop in it. So you can either mark your chains to make sure they're the same length, or you can wing it. If one happens to be a little longer, you can add some stitches. However, for the best results, it's just a little bit of consideration when you start to make sure the chains are the same length. So I'm only going to make 5, but you could do this all the way around a project. We'll show you a project in a little bit that we're working on where we've used this as an edge stitching. So right now I've got my base, my chain. So I've done my chain, and you could keep doing this long, narrow, whatever. And then you come back and you do your blanket stitching on top of the chain, and all it is a blanket stitch. So, and I have discovered, so I have learned that 5 chains fit, or 5 stitches fit on one chain. And if I make the first one and the last one tight, then it tends to look more picot, like a picot. So I'm going to come up just on the outside here of my chain, not inside my chain, but just on the outside. And then I use the eye of the needle. It works better for me. And it's just like a blanket stitch, in and on top of your thread. So the first one's a little tighter, and the rest are a little bit looser. 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th one I do a little tighter. Or if you decide 6 fits in your chain better, 6 maybe, whatever, but you need to try to be consistent on this. So then I'm in the next loop, and I'm going in the loop and on top of my thread. So the first one a little tight, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 5th one, again, I'm tightening it down a little bit so it gives it
some shape.
And then I'm going to the next one. I'm just going in the center, and it just, I like to use the eye of my needle. You wouldn't have to. You could just use, but I tend to poke into my thread then, and then it doesn't come up nice. 3. And you can see when you do this, you could try this variegated thread. It's so fun because it changes color as you go. 3, 4, 5. And you know, when you start, if you decide 6 would be better, 6, you can do 6 stitches. But that's how you keep going. And you can do down one side and up the other. I just came here and I just started back up this side, and you get this beautiful little scallop chain. And if you were using this for something of interest, like on a crazy quilt or something, you could go back and put a little colonial knot in the center, or a bead in the center, or something like that. But I will show you how we have used it on our butterfly piece. So this is called Mariposa. It has these beautiful azure butterflies and the blue morpha butterflies. And I have chain stitched around the edge. And here you can see, and it's kind of important to use a little fray check. So if you have fray check, You put your back on your piece, you fray check around it, and then you go ahead and you do a blanket or your chain stitch. So I've gone very close to the edge with my chain stitch, all the way around the edge. And then I'm going to go back and do my scallop on just one side of it. I didn't do both. You could do both. However, I did one side. And so I've got a long length of thread here, and I come up between the layers right into the last stitch that I did. So that's how you would start and stop. And in this case, I wasn't too worried about catching what was underneath. I didn't worry about it, so I went ahead and I used the point of my needle. And I actually did kind of into the edge of that piece to kind of seal it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here a case where I used a smaller chain, so it's a really thick scallop. And in this one here, because my chains were so long, I could have done 6 or 7 stitches in there, and I think it would have been very lovely. So you have to do a little experimenting on a piece of sample wool first if you're going to be using this in a project. So do a couple test samples. Kind of when knitting, you do like a test before you get started, so you know exactly what you would like it to look like. But I had decided 5 was the right amount on this chain that I did here, so I just went around and I did 5 loops on each one. So it's very easy. You go inside the chain, and I'm always on top of my thread, so it's just like a blanket stitch. And it makes kind of a little embroidered or a little crocheted edge. When I brought it in to show Katie, she said, "Did you crochet that?" I said, "Nope, it's just embroidery." But I do count and put the same number of blanket stitches on each loop. So I did 5. And it's not so important how many, as long as you're consistent, if you'd like to have something that's an even look. If you want it to be very much, each one look exactly the same. Because if you did happen to do a picot edge with crochet, you would always count how many crochets, double crochets, or single crochets, or half double crochets, whatever you're doing to make your picot edge. You would always count. So I'm going to finish up the 5th stitch on this one and then show you the outcome and some ways to use that edge. So there you are, a scalloped chain stitch. And we are here at Granny's Legacy Patterns, granny'slegacypatterns.com. You can find us on email, through email and the internet. So thank you for joining us today.